Hi everyone, Stepan here, game 86 after a break. The rating is 2280 after 85 games, and we have around 330 days to go. So let's make this one count. I took a break from playing training games because I've been playing tournaments and recording some opening videos. But now I'll try to throw in at least 1 or 2 training games per week. Okay, my opponent wants to play the old Indian, so it seems, or something similar. So queen c7, e5, knight bd7. We are gonna go e4 and play d5 at an opportune moment. My opponent's rating is 2263. We have never played. Queen a5. Is that a weird move? What does my opponent want to do? Knight e4? Bishop f5? Okay, let's not waste time. Let's go queen c2. That's flexible and it prevents knight e4. Also, it defends the knight, and on e5 we can still go e4. I feel like queen c2 is correct because I don't want to allow bishop f5. And okay, bishop g4. Well, I'm not too concerned with that. Does my opponent really take on f3? I wonder if my bishop belongs on f4 or on b3, on b2. So if bishop f4, I'm playing against e5, but then bishop f3, ef3, e5, d5, d5, bishop g3. Well, that seems okay. But I can also go e3, e3, e5, takes. Well, I can also go e4 now. What am I afraid of? e4, e5, takes. Yeah, I'm going e4. Why wouldn't I go e4? My opponent's never taking on f3, I think. Now I can safely go bishop d3 and castle kingside. Still, if my opponent takes, that's fine. Okay, so now d5 is the most tempting move, giving away the c5 square. So d5, knight bd7, bishop e3, knight c5, bishop d3, or knight c5 takes. Do I play d5? Let's just continue developing. I'm gonna go bishop e3 and on ed, bishop d. I'm not going to commit to d5 before my opponent castles. That's usually the correct way to play these positions. My opponent wants to go takes, bishop takes, and knight c5. So do I play bishop d3 or do I castle? So bishop e2, takes, knight c5, castles, defends the pawn because my knight isn't pinned anymore. Let's do that. Also, I may choose to take with the knight. Do I take with the knight? No, I take with the bishop. Why am I down on the clock? I need to speed up. Okay, now d5 is more tempting at this point because my opponent has castled. So they are closer to playing rook e8 and putting pressure on the e-pawn. Do I have any tricks with knight takes e5? No, I don't. I can also play rook d1. I can also play rook d1 and start putting pressure on the pawn on d6. I like that. Which rook? Rook fd1. That seems useful. I have a game in the Old Indian which I had played during my last tournament, and my opponent's queen was on c7. So I always had tricks of knight e5 and d6 after d5. We will see. Maybe my opponent... I know that it's correct to play d5 as soon as they castle in these structures, but with the queen on c7. I'm not sure about these positions with the queen on a5. To be honest, I'm not sure what the queen does on a5 once the king castles, because then the e4 pawn is defended and the knight is no longer pinned. h6 is a strange move. What does h6 do? So if I go h3, my opponent goes bishop h5. So what? I can then play knight h4, threatening g4. Yeah, I like that. My opponent has to take on f3. It feels like bishop f3 is the only correct move here. h6 weakens the g6 square, so knight h4 is a strong threat, unless knight e4 works, which... Okay, knight h4, knight e4 takes, bishop takes h4, knight takes d6, that works. Knight h4, bishop e2, queen e2, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop takes h4, knight takes d6, also works. So, knight h4, bishop e2, queen e2, knight e4. Well, I can play queen e4. What am I talking about? Defending the knight. Yeah, okay, just work. No, I cannot if my queen is on e2. So wait a minute. Knight h4, bishop e2, queen e2, knight e4, knight e4, bishop h4, knight d6. Is that too committal? Knight h4, bishop e2, queen e2. Oh wait, I can play knight takes e2. Knight h4, bishop e2, knight e2. And then if knight e4, then queen e4 defends the knight on h4, and I'm threatening knight f5. Yeah, I like that, I like that. You can see the problem with h6 now. My opponent doesn't have bishop g6. And I'm also threatening knight f5, which would be huge. And my queen defends the knight if knight e4. And there is no knight h5. Oh, sorry, knight g4, because I take with the pawn, attacking the bishop. I'm just trying to get my knight to f5. This is strategically correct because my opponent has played h6, making g6 unplayable due to my bishop on e3 and my potential knight on f5. I will have to watch out for knight f5, ed4, bishop d4, because then the f5 square is attacked by the queen. I'm still down on the clock. Okay, so I was thinking knight e2. Yeah, knight e2. And if knight e4, queen e4. If knight d5, probably knight f5, because on knight e3, knight e7, check wins. If ed, bishop d. Excuse me. If g6, bishop h6. Yeah, the knight's coming to f5. h6 was a positionally very dubious move. And never play h6 in king pawn structures, double king pawn structures, e4, e5, as is the case here, unless you have a plan of how to protect the f5 square or the f4 square. In this case, my opponent's knights really aren't able to get to f4 because I have too many defenders. Another reason why I played knight e2 and not queen e2. And the f5 square is up for grabs. I mean, when I play knight f5, how does my opponent react? d5 cannot be played because the bishop's hanging. If rook e8, I'm not even sure I take the bishop, although I could take on e5, open up my rook down the d file. Finally catching up on time. Come on. I want to have a time advantage. Yes, we're up on the clock. Good. Good. It's looking good. I mean, I love my position. This is why you delay d5 and committing in the center in these old Indian structures, because sometimes the d6 pawn can be weak. Okay, rook e8, my opponent wants to play bishop f8. That's smart. So do I play d5 now? d5 now seems a bit more promising. Or knight f5. Knight f5 is a quick move that I can always make. But since the rook is on e8, I'm going to close the position down with d5. Because now the rook is completely useless down the e file. And I know I have given up the c5 square, but I mean, I have f3, worst case. I have knight c3. I also have bishop takes c5, which I'm not sure I want to do. Knight e4 still doesn't work because I take with the queen. And if my opponent doesn't take now, then I'm taking on c6 and knight f5 actually wins the pawn. Because let's say knight c5, dc6, bc6, knight f5. My opponent would have to play... I don't even know. I don't think there's a way to defend the pawn other than queen c7. But then I can take the bishop on e7, rook e7, and queen d2. And d6 inevitably falls. Not queen d2, queen d3, so that I keep an eye on e4. Up a minute on the clock, that's good. And my opponent's queen on a5 is oddly misplaced. It's not doing anything. I bought some weird coffee today, so I went down to the local shop, and usually I buy my coffee in Interspar, Spar, whatever. Do we take on c6? Takes b takes, knight f5. How does my opponent defend the pawn? Yeah, I'm doing that, of course. Knight f5. How do you defend your pawn? Queen c7? Once again, you can see the problem with h6. You don't have g6. In double king pawn structures, you want to be able to play g6 and bishop g7. In the Spanish, in the Italian... Okay. So still fine, still fine. We have pressure on d6. And if I double up my rooks, how does my opponent keep defending? Because the queen is pinned. My opponent can never play cd. So rook d2, some move like rook d8. Rook a d1, knight b6 seems forced. But then the knight isn't coming to c5. I like that. I like that. I'm just gonna double my rooks. And let's keep putting pressure on the biggest weakness in old Indian slash Czech period structures, the d6 pawn. I love these structures. This is actually the same structure I had in the tournament game. You can see that game. It was against Benko Bostian. A dreadful endgame in which I had a plus a million advantage and in time trouble blundered and had gone into a painful draw. I didn't want to revisit that game, but I outplayed my opponent in the middle game, and it was very, very similar to this. He had an isolated a-pawn. Although the a-file was open, so I could put pressure on that pawn. But even so, this structure is very, very good for white. Weakness on a7, weakness on d6. Okay, let's double up. My opponent's going to go knight b6. And now we need to think of a plan, or knight c5. But knight c5 seems bad, because I just take it. Or I can also go knight c3. Although I don't want to go knight c3. On knight c5 I can go knight c3 and b4. On knight c5 I can also go f3 followed by b4. I actually like f3 to solidify the pawn forever. And on knight c5 I can also take. Okay, my opponent plays knight b6. Do I have any tricks with c5? Not yet. c5 takes. Takes. No, it doesn't work. I don't really want to go f3 because then there may be knight h5. But can I play knight g3? Knight g3 is very strange. Can I also go a4, provoking a5? a4, a5. Then the knight isn't defended. Then I can take. Ooh. I can go knight takes d6. a4, a5, bishop b6, queen b6. Knight takes d6. Interesting. Threatening c5. Okay, I like that. I like that a lot. Although, can my opponent play knight e4? No. No. We're going a4. When your opponent has a knight on b6, a4 is always a candidate move to misplace that knight. I have given away the b4 square, so maybe d5 is a bit more scary now. But it still wins a pawn, and the queen is still tied down, and cd can never be played, so... Excuse me. Okay, a5. Now, can I just take on b6? Bishop b6, queen b6, knight d6. Bishop b6, queen b6, knight d6, threatening c5. That seems good to me. I'm gonna go for it. Do I have to watch out for f2? I don't think so. I mean, I know I'm cashing in on my strategic advantage, but it's a central d pawn. Now, if I get to play c5, my position is huge. And if my opponent plays c5, I have knight b5. I mean, I can always bring the knight back to f5 if I want to. Yeah, everything is solid. Everything is fine. If the c-pawn moves, I also have knight c3, knight d5. Yeah, I love my position. This is I will say that a grandmaster would win this with white every time. I can mess up, but still, my position is amazing. Also, the a-pawn is weak. Also, my dishwasher is done, so you will hear some peeping noises. All right, makes sense. Triple attacking the knight, but losing the exchange maybe. Can I get away with knight b7? Knight b7, rook d2. Rook d2. Queen attacks the knight. Maybe knight b7 doesn't work. Knight b7, rook d2. Rook d2, queen. Where does the queen go? The queen probably goes to a7. Yeah, I don't like that. I'm bringing my knight to safety, I think. To f5. Now g6 is playable. I no longer have a bishop on e3. That's unfortunate, but I am up a pawn. I don't think knight f7 worked because rook d2, and the best I have is knight takes h6. My knight is so good. Having a knight on f5 is really a big strategic advantage in most cases. I'm very happy I haven't played f3. All right. I don't know what to do. But my knight on e2 is useless. So my knight on e2 is my worst piece. I want to bring it to e3, maybe. So knight g3 looks interesting. Knight g3, if g6, I have knight d6 and knight e3. And I can also go knight f1. Okay, I'm controlling the d file, that's good. But I do have to improve my knight. Do I want to go knight c1? Not really. Okay, I'm playing knight g3. That's an active move that prevents knight h5, knight f4. What if my opponent goes h5? No, that's not a big deal. Oh, my opponent wants to go rook b4. I didn't see rook b4. Maybe I do go knight c1. Knight c1 if rook b4, knight d3, rook c4, knight c5, winning. Okay, knight c1 it is. It's a bad knight, and it wasn't doing anything, and I have to prevent rook b4, so... Also, it helps me play b3 if I want to. I lost a lot of time on that move. Maybe it's a bad move, but it does prevent rook b4. Knight h5 is a big concern now. Knight h5 is strong. Yeah, knight c1 was bad. Who cares about rook b4? Why is my knight on c1? I sometimes get into this weird thinking process of looking at active moves, and then I see a threat, and then I just change my mind and play a move that prevents it, even if it's detrimental to my position. Now I'm no longer covering g3 or f4. On knight h5, I may just have to go back. Although, okay. So, knight e3 seems reasonable. I see no reason not to play knight e3. Seems like the best move. Now the knight on f6 is slightly loose. I don't know if I can use that, but maybe I can. Queen b6. What? Aha, wants to go bishop c5. Okay. Bishop c5. What if I go queen c3? Then knight e4. Queen e5. Queen c3, knight e4, queen e5. On bishop c5, I'm not really that worried, because I can go queen d3. Man, I wish I could play f3, but I cannot. Ooh, I do see a nice move. On bishop c5, I can go knight g4. If my opponent goes bishop b4, what do I do? Bishop b4 is a concern, but I have rook e2. Okay, for now I'm going king h2. I don't want to be pinned, and I want to eventually be able to play f3. So on bishop b4 I'm going rook e2, on bishop c5 I'm going knight g4. Attacking the e pawn. And my opponent has to take. I mean, is there an alter? Ah, there is knight takes e4. Knight e4, queen e4, f5. Oh, I have queen h4. Okay. Luckily for me, I have queen h4. Okay, so b3 seems like the only move. I don't see an alternative. So I'm gonna go b3 quickly. Now I need to improve my knight. And in order to do that, I need to move my rook. Yeah. So I'm thinking f3 followed by rook d3 followed by knight e2. Is that good? That seems weird, but I'm still doing it. Is giving away the e3 square a big deal? I don't think so. I want my knight on d5. Okay, so knight e2. Oh, oof, oof. My opponent's threatening mate. What am I doing? What have I done? Oh my god. I didn't even see queen h4 check. Why didn't I see queen h4 check? Do I go king h3? I can also sack the exchange on d4. Can I get away with king h3? Maybe. I'm playing king h3. Okay. Knight e2. Takes, king g7. Do I play king takes? No, pawn takes. I may just get mated. So I think I may have to sack the exchange on d4 after all. I should have done that instead of king h3. King g7, what do I do? Because I need my knight covering f4. Okay, I have to play rook d4 or I'm getting mated. I don't think there's an alternative. I should have gone rook d4 instead of h3. What was I thinking? I ended up misplaying this game very badly. Okay, so I like the idea of rerouting my knight to h3 to cover f4. I can also get my knight to d3. That seems sensible. I just need to do something quickly. But if I move my knight now, my opponent has queen f6, queen f4, checkmate. So, queen d2, or leave my knight where it is. Okay, I have to play queen d2. I'm playing queen d2. Covering f4 once more so that my knight can move. Okay, so g5, rook h5, knight g3 works. g5, queen h5. Oh, there is queen h5. Still, I'm playing g5. I have to block rook f6. Why did I... What? What am I doing? Why did I think knight g3 defended g5? Oh my god. Yeah, now I'm just losing. What the hell was that? Why did I think knight g3 defended g5? Okay, let me expand this so that you guys can see. Oh no, 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 no. Okay, this way you should be able to see the engine evaluation and everything. So let's see. Oh, this was so bad. Okay, so let's start here. Request a computer analysis. So, can you guys see this? I think you can, yeah. Okay, so h3, knight h4, best move. Wait, I should have taken with the queen? Okay. d5 is a mistake. I should have gone knight f5 straight away. I should have gone knight d6 first. Yeah, that makes sense. But okay. Knight c1 was good. Knight g4 was bad. f3, losing move. Why did I play f3? What's the point of f3? There was no point to f3. And I had 5 minutes on the clock. I should have gone g5. Wow. Yeah, it's just losing. Two inaccuracies, 4 mistake. My opponent played pretty well. 2 inaccuracies, 1 mistake. 24 average centipawn loss, 93% accuracy. Very precise game in a tough position. So congratulations to my opponent. Yeah, this was tough. See you in the next one. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye-bye.